$13 billion, 160 combat sorties a day, one ship that can level a country before dinner. Nothing in any ocean comes close to what's sitting on the flight deck of USS Gerald R. Forward right now. How does a single carrier become the most lethal weapon system ever built? Let's find out. $13 billion. That's not the cost of a highway system, a space mission, or a decade of foreign aid. That's the price tag of a single American aircraft carrier, one ship. And right now, the United States Navy operates 11 of them, simultaneously, spread across every ocean on Earth. Here's what makes that number truly staggering. The entire annual defense budget of Germany, Europe's largest economy, a NATO founding member, sits at roughly $90 billion. That means 11 American aircraft carriers represent nearly 1/6 of everything Germany spends on its military in a full calendar year. Iran's entire defense budget, $10 billion. They couldn't buy one. Not even close. So the question that should be burning in your mind right now is, what exactly are you getting for $13 billion? Each Ford-class carrier deploys with 70 to 80 aircraft simultaneously on its flight deck, and in its hangars below, it carries more than 5,000 crew members, a floating city the size of 3 football fields, stacked end to end, and it can strike targets across a combat radius exceeding 1,600 kilometers without ever moving from its position. In a single day, a single carrier can launch 160 individual combat sorties. 160. To put that in brutal perspective, that's more than double the total daily sortie rate that the entire Royal Air Force managed during the Falklands War in 1982, one of the most intense naval air campaigns in modern history. One ship, one day, more firepower than an entire nation's air force at war. The crown jewel of that striking power is the F-35C Lightning II, the carrier variant of America's 5th generation stealth fighter. Each F-35C carries an AN/APG-81 AESA radar with a detection range exceeding 150 kilometers against fighter-sized targets. Its distributed aperture system, 6 infrared cameras mounted around the entire airframe, gives the pilot a complete 360-degree spherical view of the battlefield. Enemy aircraft cannot hide behind clouds, terrain, or total darkness. The pilot literally sees through the aircraft in every direction simultaneously. The stealth shaping of the F-35C reduces its radar cross-section to approximately 0.0015 square meters, roughly the radar signature of a metal golf ball, making it virtually invisible to the majority of air defense systems currently deployed by potential adversaries. But what truly separates the F-35C from everything else flying off carrier decks is what it carries internally. 2 GBU-53/B Stormbreaker smart bombs, weapons with a standoff range of 110 kilometers, a mass of just 93 kilograms each, and a tri-mode seeker combining millimeter wave radar, infrared imaging, and semi-active laser guidance. This means one bomb can locate and destroy a moving armored vehicle in a sandstorm, in complete darkness, with zero communication from the launching aircraft after release. Most air forces on Earth don't have anything remotely comparable. That level of precision, repeatable, autonomous, unstoppable is what $13 billion actually purchases. The FA-18E/F Super Hornet remains the proven foundation of every carrier air wing. These aircraft transition seamlessly from air-to-air combat to precision ground strikes within the same mission profile, carrying AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles with a maximum range of 160 kilometers, a GM-65 Maverick precision missiles, and JDAM GPS guided bombs with a circular error probable of under 5 meters. Each weapon is controllable, repeatable, and surgically precise. A Super Hornet pilot can take off hunting enemy aircraft, destroy a hardened command bunker mid-mission, and return to the carrier having accomplished 2 entirely different combat objectives in a single flight. In 2024, carrier air wings received something that genuinely alarmed adversary military planners worldwide: the AIM-174B, Built on the proven SM-6 missile platform, the AIM-174B gives carrier-based fighters an air-to-air engagement range exceeding 400 kilometers, more than 4 times the reach of missiles most enemy fighters carry. Enemy pilots who believed they were operating in a safe standoff zone suddenly found American missiles tracking them at speeds above Mach 3.5 from distances they never considered dangerous.
This single weapon effectively collapsed the tactical geography that rival air forces had spent a decade building their entire combat doctrine around. What do you think truly terrifies America's adversaries? More, the sheer number of sorties, or the weapons those aircraft carry? Drop your answer in the comments below.
If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because what comes next will show you exactly why enemy nations spend billions of dollars simply trying to figure out how to sink just one of these ships. But launching 160 aircraft every single day requires something extraordinary beneath that flight deck, a technology that took the U.S. Navy 20 years and $4.7 billion to perfect, and one that nearly broke the entire program before it changed naval warfare forever.
There is a moment on the flight deck of USS Gerald R. Ford that you will never forget if you witness it in person. A 29,000 kilogram F-35C Lightning II fully loaded with weapons, fuel, and electronics accelerates from a complete standstill to 333 kilometers per hour in exactly 2 seconds. Not 10 seconds, not 5, 2. The aircraft doesn't roll down a runway building speed gradually. It erupts off the deck like a projectile from a railgun, gone before your brain has fully processed what your eyes just witnessed. That violent, breathtaking acceleration is the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, and the physics behind it are as precise as they are brutal. EMALS replaced the steam catapults that had launched aircraft off American carriers since the 1950s. The old system stored compressed steam in large accumulators and released it in a single explosive burst through a piston connected to the aircraft's launch bar. It was brutally effective, but fundamentally crude. The energy delivery was deeply uneven, a massive force spike at the beginning of the stroke that placed enormous structural stress on airframes, followed by a gradual decay as steam pressure dropped across the launch stroke. Over thousands of launches, that repetitive stress accumulates invisibly inside metal. Structural fatigue accelerates, maintenance cycles shorten, aircraft reach their airframe life limits years ahead of schedule. EMALS eliminated that problem with an entirely different physics. The system uses a linear induction motor, essentially a conventional electric motor unrolled into a straight line, spanning the full 91-meter length of the launch track. Precisely controlled electromagnetic fields accelerate the launch carriage, and therefore the aircraft, with a force profile that can be programmed and adjusted for every individual launch. The energy delivered per cycle reaches approximately 122 megajoules, equivalent to roughly 34 kilowatt hours of electricity, discharged in under 3 seconds. That energy profile can be tuned to tight tolerances depending on aircraft type, gross weight, and weapons configuration.
An F-35C at maximum takeoff weight receives a fundamentally different energy curve than an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye at 26,000 kilograms. The system recalculates and reconfigures between every single launch automatically. But here's what the official press releases didn't tell you. Between 2017 and 2019, the Department of Defense's own Director of Operational Test and Evaluation published reports documenting a mean cycles between critical failure rate that fell catastrophically short of requirements. Early in testing, EMALS experienced a critical failure approximately every 400 launches. The Navy's operational requirement demanded one failure per 4,166 launches, a tenfold performance gap that is not a rounding error. Congressional hearings grew hostile.
Defense Secretary James Mattis publicly questioned whether the technology was ready for deployment. The Ford program faced genuine cancellation risk at the highest levels of Pentagon leadership. What saved EMALS was not a single engineering breakthrough, but a grinding, methodical campaign of hardware redesign, software architecture overhaul, and power conditioning improvements conducted jointly by General Atomics, the system's primary manufacturer, and Naval Air Systems Command engineers, working in rotating shifts around the clock at Lakehurst, New Jersey. By 2023, the mean cycles between critical failure had improved dramatically, approaching operational requirements under real fleet conditions. The lesson embedded in that story is one the Navy will never headline in a press release. The most powerful weapons in history are almost always catastrophically broken before they finally work. Moving tons of ordnance from deep storage to the flight deck is the other half of this equation. And Ford's 12 advanced weapons elevators represent an equally radical departure from legacy carrier design. Each electromagnetic elevator can lift 10,886 kilograms in a single cycle, completed in under 90 seconds. On Nimitz-class carriers, legacy mechanical and hydraulic weapons elevators required between 60 and 90 minutes to move equivalent volumes of ordnance from lower storage decks to the flight deck. That difference isn't operational convenience. In a high-intensity conflict scenario, the speed at which a carrier can rearm its aircraft directly determines the real-world sortie rate, and the AWE is precisely what makes 160 daily combat sorties operationally achievable rather than merely theoretical on a planning document. Behind every elevator low, every armed aircraft, every weapons cart staged on that deck is a team of aviation ordnance men, AOs, and Navy rating nomenclature, working in conditions that would shut down any civilian facility. Deep in the ship's ordnance handling spaces, ambient temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius during sustained flight operations. Noise levels from flight deck activity overhead measure consistently above 130 decibels, loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage within minutes of unprotected exposure. These sailors, the majority of them 19 and 20 years old on their first operational deployment, handle live bombs, missiles, and rocket motors with a precision and disciplined methodology that experienced combat observers consistently describe as genuinely extraordinary. They are the reason the mathematics of carrier air power translate from planning documents into actual combat results. Here's a question worth sitting with. Why did the U.S. Navy fight to preserve EMALS through years of documented failures and hundreds of millions in remediation costs, when the proven steam catapults had launched aircraft reliably for 7 decades? The answer has nothing to do with launch speed, and it reveals everything about what these ships will be capable of doing by 2035. You've now seen how the Ford launches its strikes, but what happens the moment the enemy fires back? The defensive architecture of USS Gerald R. Ford was engineered specifically to defeat threats that the Navy's own engineers privately describe as the worst-case nightmare scenario, and what they built in response will genuinely surprise you. Every carrier strike group operates on one foundational principle. No single weapon system stops a determined adversary. What stops them is geometry overlapping, redundant kill zones arranged in concentric rings extending outward from the carrier itself. This is layered defense doctrine, and aboard USS Gerald R. Ford, it begins 1,600 kilometers from the hull and ends at a Gatling gun mounted meters from the flight deck edge.
Understanding each layer is the only way to understand why this system, as a whole, is unlike anything that has ever sailed. The outermost layer stretches 500 to 1,600 kilometers from the carrier, and it is entirely offensive. F-35 sea fighters armed with AIM-174B missiles, engaging beyond 400 kilometers, create a kill zone so vast that enemy aircraft must penetrate it before positioning to launch their own weapons.
The Navy doesn't wait for threats to approach, it kills the platforms carrying those threats before they reach their release points. At this range, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, flying at 900 meters, with its AN/APY, 9 radar scanning 556 kilometers in every direction, is already tracking every airborne contact across a zone larger than Western Europe.
From 50 to 500 kilometers, defense transitions to escort destroyers, Arleigh Burke-class DDGs, each carrying 90 to 96 vertical launch system cells loaded with SM-2 Block 3C and SM-6 missiles. The SM-2 Block 3C engages targets at 170 kilometers at Mach 3.5. The SM-6, with a range exceeding 370 kilometers, intercepts aircraft, cruise missiles, and ballistic warheads in terminal descent. A standard carrier strike group deploys 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers, collectively over 250 VLS cells, creating missile density that saturates any realistic threat corridor with overlapping engagement envelopes. From 5 to 50 kilometers, the RIM 162 ESSM Block 2 takes over. Each missile reaches Mach 4 and carries an active radar seeker capable of engaging sea-skimming threats at altitudes as low as 5 meters above the wave tops.
ESSM loads in quad-packed VLS configurations, 4 missiles per cell instead of 1. That geometric multiplication of magazine capacity is a direct engineering response to saturation attacks designed to exhaust defenses before the carrier is reached. Inside 5 kilometers, 2 systems form the absolute final barrier. The RIM 116C rolling airframe missile uses dual-mode infrared and passive radio frequency guidance to prosecute survivors of every outer layer reaching Mach 2. 0 ranges up to 9 kilometers. Behind it stands the Phalanx Block, 1 BCIWSA 20mm Gatling cannon, firing 4,500 rounds per minute, with its own integrated radar operating completely autonomously. No human input, no command delay. At these ranges, there is no time for a human decision loop. Here is where honesty demands something uncomfortable. The DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile travels at speeds exceeding Mach 10 in terminal phase, carrying a maneuvering re-entry vehicle designed specifically to defeat carrier defenses, with a published range of 1,500 kilometers. At Mach, 10 terminal intercept windows measure in single-digit seconds. The SM-3 Block 2A has demonstrated successful intercepts in controlled tests, but a maneuvering warhead descending at Mach 10 in a contested electromagnetic environment is a categorically different problem. No serving naval officer will guarantee intercept. What they will say is that executing such an attack requiring precise real-time targeting data and defeating all outer layers first makes it extraordinarily difficult rather than theoretically impossible.
Red Sea operations in 2023 and 2024 produced a data point that altered Pentagon procurement thinking permanently. USS Carney, DDG-64, intercepted 14 Houthi drones and 3 anti-ship missiles in a single night, expending SM-2 and SM-6 missiles averaging $2.1 million and $4.5 million per round against threats costing the Houthis under $300,000 total to manufacture and launch.
That economic asymmetry is a structural strategic vulnerability. Adversaries worldwide are actively designing future campaigns around. The 2025 answer is directed energy. The Coyote Block 3 counter-drone system and the Leonidas high-power microwave weapon now integrated into carrier strike group deployments engage drone swarms at costs measured in dollars per intercept, using electromagnetic energy that cannot be exhausted as long as the ship generates power. What is the single most dangerous threat to an American carrier strike group right now? Hypersonic missiles, submarines, or low-cost drone swarms designed to exhaust defensive magazines? Leave your answer below. No defensive system has ever won a battle alone. The true revolution aboard USS Gerald R. Ford is the invisible architecture linking every sensor, every missile, and every aircraft into a single thinking entity. And that is what we're going inside next. Most people think of a carrier strike group as ships and aircraft operating in coordination. That mental model is 20 years out of date. What USS Gerald R. Ford commands is a kill web, not a kill chain. A kill chain is linear sensor finds target. Sensor tells shooter, shooter fires. Break any link and the chain fails. A kill web has no single link. Every node simultaneously receives and transmits targeting data, meaning any sensor on any platform can cue any weapon on any other platform, regardless of whether that weapon's platform can independently see the target. The Naval Integrated Fire Control Counter, Air System NIFC-CA, is that doctrine made operational. At its center flies the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, transmitting fire control quality, targeting data via cooperative engagement capability data links to every ship and aircraft simultaneously. A destroyer 400 kilometers from the carrier, well beyond its own radar, Horizon receives a targeting solution from the Hawkeye and launches an SM-6 that flies the entire engagement autonomously. The target never appears on the destroyer's screens. The missile fires anyway. It finds the target anyway.
It kills it anyway. That is not coordination. That is one distributed weapon system occupying dozens of physically separate platforms. The MQ-25A Stingray completed its first successful aerial refueling of a carrier-based F/A-18 Super Hornet in 2021, a milestone that received minimal public attention, but represented the most significant shift in carrier aviation in decades.
Operating at ranges exceeding 850 kilometers, with fuel offload capacity sufficient to extend an F/A-18's combat radius by 300 to 400 nautical miles. The Stingray allows strike missions that previously required 2 carriers to be executed by one ship doing the strategic work of 2 without adding a single additional crew member to the flight schedule.
The Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program has 5 contractors competing right now: Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Atomics, Lockheed Martin, and Admiral Industries. The aircraft they are building are not pilot replacements. They are force multipliers. One F-35C pilot controlling 3 to 5 autonomous CCA simultaneously. Each mission optimized independently, some configured for enemy air defense suppression, others for deep strike, others for electronic warfare.
A carrier deploying 20 CCA alongside its manned air wing effectively doubles combat output without adding a single additional pilot. Now the twist, and this is where honesty requires saying something official briefings never will. The most sophisticated carrier ever built is not most vulnerable to the weapons everyone fears. It is vulnerable to cyber warfare and logistics. NIFCCA's kill. Web depends entirely on data link integrity. China's PLA Strategic Support Force has invested heavily in electromagnetic spectrum warfare and cyber intrusion capabilities designed specifically to degrade or spoof those data links. A carrier that cannot communicate with its strike group is not a kill web. It is 11,000 tons of isolated steel. The second vulnerability is equally unglamorous fuel. A Ford-class carrier conducting sustained flight operations consumes aviation fuel exceeding 2 million liters per day across its air wing. The supply vessels maintaining that flow are unarmored or slow and operating inside the same threat environment as the carrier itself. Here's the strategic truth every adversary calculates: USS Gerald R. Ford is not primarily a weapon. It is a mobile geopolitical declaration. When a Ford-class carrier strike group positions in the Taiwan Strait or the Persian Gulf, the message reaches every government and every military headquarters within 2,000 kilometers without a single weapon leaving its launcher. The physics of what the ship carries, the mathematics of what its air wing delivers within hours, and the history of what American carriers do in order to act, all combine into one unmistakable signal. The carrier doesn't need to fire to communicate.
Its presence is the argument. Its weapons are the punctuation. What's your honest take in the era of hypersonic missiles, cyber warfare, and drone swarms? Does the aircraft carrier still represent the future of naval power? Or is it becoming the most expensive symbol in military history? Tell me in the comments. If this gave you something, real facts you didn't have, angles you hadn't considered, hit like and subscribe.
Every week we go deeper into the weapons, the doctrine, and the strategic realities shaping the world you live in. The next video will challenge something else you think you already understand with the same numbers, the same honesty, and zero mythology.